The moment I opened the wedding invitation, my heart stopped. My brother Ethan's name was written across the elegant gold-trimmed card, announcing the day he had been bragging about for months. At first glance, it looked like a normal invitation, but then, tucked inside, there was a handwritten note, sharp and mocking in tone. It read, "You're invited, but don't expect to sit with family. There's a separate table for losers." I felt the blood rush to my face. It wasn't just an insult, it was a declaration, a cruel reminder of how my family had always viewed me. Ethan had crossed lines before, but putting something like this in writing, tying it to what was supposed to be one of the most important days of his life, showed just how little respect he had for me. And worse, I knew he thought everyone else in the family would find it funny. That single note set the stage for everything that would come next. To understand why this hit so hard, you need to know who I am. My name is Claire Whitman, and for as long as I can remember, I've been the outsider in my own family. My older brother, Ethan, was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in my mother's eyes. Our mother, Linda, praised every one of his achievements, from winning spelling bees in elementary school to building his flashy business as an adult. Our father, George, never spoke against him, preferring to keep the peace, which meant I was always left unprotected when the jokes and comparisons turned against me. The only person who consistently stood by me was Grandpa Walter, my father's father. He was old-fashioned in many ways, but he had a soft heart and a sharp wit. He saw through the arrogance Ethan carried and often reminded me, "Don't let them define your worth, Claire. The world has a way of revealing people's true character." His words comforted me, but they couldn't erase years of feeling second best. So when I held that invitation with its cruel little note, I didn't just see Ethan mocking me. I saw years of family dinners where I was treated like the problem. I heard my mother's dismissive tone when she'd say things like, "If only you tried as hard as your brother, maybe you'd have something to show for yourself." I remembered the nights I went home in tears after Ethan laughed at my modest apartment, or called me boring because I didn't flaunt money the way he did. And now here it was in black and white, an actual seat assignment, not among family, but at a so-called loser's table. I had two options in that moment. I could crumple the note, throw it in the trash, and refuse to go. That's what Ethan expected me to do. Walk away humiliated, proving his point that I didn't belong. Or I could do something different. I didn't cry, I didn't scream. I didn't even call my mother to demand an explanation because I already knew what she would say. "Oh, Claire, don't be so sensitive. Ethan was just joking." Instead, I held the card in my hand, took a deep breath, and made a decision. I would RSVP yes. I would show up, smiling, even if it meant sitting at that table Ethan had set aside to humiliate me. But what he didn't know was that I had already set something in motion, something that would turn his perfect wedding day into the moment he would never forget. The invitation was supposed to shame me. Instead, it lit a fire inside me. And as I sealed my RSVP card and dropped it into the mailbox, I whispered to myself, "Let's see who the real loser is." My name is Claire Whitman, and at 28, I've built a life that is steady, modest, and mine. I work as a financial analyst in a mid-sized firm, the kind of job that doesn't make headlines but keeps the bills paid and leaves me with a sense of pride. My apartment is small but warm, filled with plants I've kept alive and books stacked in corners. It's not the kind of home that impresses the neighbors, but it's a place that reflects who I am: independent, careful, and quietly determined. Still, in my family's eyes, none of that ever mattered. Success in the Whitman household has always been measured in wealth, appearances, and loud accomplishments. And when you grow up under that kind of microscope, every decision you make becomes ammunition for comparison. My brother, Ethan Whitman, is 4 years older than me. And for as long as I can remember, he has been held up as the shining example of everything I supposedly wasn't. He had charm, ambition, and a way of walking into a room that made people pay attention. He thrived on it. While I was the kid who brought home solid grades, Ethan was the one whose trophies lined the shelves. He wasn't just the firstborn, he was the favorite. Our mother, Linda, never hid her admiration for Ethan. She'd sit at the dinner table smiling with pride as she said things like, "Ethan always knew how to aim higher. He's going places." Whenever I tried to share something I had accomplished, it was brushed aside. If I got a promotion at work, the response would be, "That's nice, Claire, but have you seen the new property Ethan just bought?" Her words cut deep, not because I wanted to compete, but because I wanted to be seen. My father, George, was quieter. He avoided conflict, always lowering his eyes whenever Ethan's arrogance became too much. If I ever pushed back against the favoritism, my father's answer was simple. It's just easier not to stir things up. To him, peace in the family meant silence, and silence meant I had to swallow my feelings alone. The only voice that ever rose in my defense belonged to my grandfather, Walter. He was nearing 80 now, but age hadn't dulled his wit or his compassion. Sitting beside me on his porch swing during summer visits, he'd place a hand on mine and say, "You don't have to prove anything to them, Claire. You've got a good head on your shoulders, and someday that'll matter more than their shallow praise." He was the one person who saw me, really saw me, without measuring my worth against Ethan's shadow. This imbalance in our family shaped me. While Ethan grew louder, I grew steadier. I learned to take pride in the things no one else noticed: the discipline of budgeting, the quiet confidence of knowing I could take care of myself, the patience to plan for the long term. But none of that earned applause at family gatherings. Instead, it turned into a running joke that I was the practical one, said with a smirk, as if being careful with money or choosing stability over flash was something to mock. By the time Ethan announced his engagement, the lines between us were clearer than ever. He flaunted his fiancée's diamond ring at Thanksgiving dinner, drawing gasps and congratulations from relatives. My mother dabbed her eyes, declaring it the beginning of the perfect future for her perfect son. My father raised a toast, and Ethan basked in the attention. I clapped along with everyone else, even though I knew not a single person at that table would have done the same for me. I had been excluded so often that I had stopped expecting anything different. Still, a part of me hoped that a wedding, something meant to unite families, might soften the walls they had built between us. Maybe this time, I thought, there would be a seat at the table that felt like it was truly mine. That fragile hope shattered when the invitation arrived with Ethan's note about the losers' table. It wasn't just a jab, it was confirmation of what I had felt my whole life. To them, I wasn't family, not really. I was an outsider they tolerated because they had to, the one they expected to sit quietly on the sidelines while Ethan took the spotlight. In those days before the wedding, I found myself thinking back to moments that had defined this divide. I remembered the Christmas when I saved all year to buy our parents a thoughtful gift, a framed photo album of family memories, only for Linda to gush over the expensive gadget Ethan had bought instead. I remembered my college graduation, where Ethan joked to the crowd that I'd finally done something worth clapping for. I remembered the way my father chuckled nervously, doing nothing to stop it. Every insult, every dismissal, every moment where I was told, directly or indirectly, that I didn't measure up, came rushing back to me. And yet, standing in my apartment with the invitation in hand, I realized something important. I wasn't that little girl at the dinner table anymore, waiting for my parents to notice me. I wasn't the insecure teenager comparing her clothes to Ethan's flashy cars. I wasn't the young adult biting her tongue at holidays. I had built something for myself. I had made choices they couldn't understand, investments they didn't know about, and a life they underestimated. And while they still saw me as the loser who didn't play by their rules, I knew something they didn't. The stage was set. Ethan's arrogance had given me the perfect opening, and for once, I wouldn't just sit quietly in the corner. This time, I would walk into that wedding on my own terms, carrying a truth that none of them were prepared for. The invitation sat on my coffee table for days, its glossy cardstock catching the light as if mocking me every time I walked past. I had read and reread Ethan's note until the words felt carved into my skin. There's a separate table for losers. At first, I thought it might be a joke, but the handwriting was his. The smirk I could imagine on his face as he wrote it told me this wasn't meant to be funny. It was meant to cut deep. The truth was, Ethan had been cutting me down for years. He thrived on it. At family dinners, he would take any opportunity to turn my life into the punchline. When I bought my apartment, he laughed, saying, "What's the square footage?" Or, "Is it too small to measure?" When I mentioned my promotion, he quipped, "How exciting, so now you're in charge of other boring people." His insults were never clever, but they didn't have to be. They stung because he always had an audience. My mother would laugh, my father would say nothing, and cousins or uncles would chuckle along, eager not to be on the receiving end themselves. But this invitation, this was something new. This was public humiliation planned in advance, written in black ink, delivered to my mailbox with the same flourish as a royal decree. He wanted me to show up, sit at his so-called loser's table, and let every guest see just how low he ranked me in his world. A few nights after I got the invitation, I had dinner with my parents. I didn't bring up the note right away, but it weighed heavily on me. My mother, as usual, couldn't stop talking about Ethan's wedding. "Do you realize how grand it's going to be?" she asked, her eyes shining. "Ethan and Marissa spared no expense. The venue is stunning, the menu is gourmet, and the guest list, oh, Claire, there will be so many important people there." I pushed my fork around my plate. "I'm sure it'll be beautiful," I said, keeping my voice even. She leaned forward with a smile. "It's the kind of event people will talk about for years. You should be grateful Ethan included you." I finally looked up. Grateful? For being invited to my own brother's wedding? She waved a hand, dismissive. "Don't twist my words. You know what I mean. He doesn't have to invite everyone. He wanted you there, and that's what matters." The words caught in my throat. She didn't know about the note, or maybe she did, and she simply didn't care. I felt my jaw tighten as I forced myself not to explode. Later that week, I ran into Ethan at a family gathering. He was in rare form, strutting around the living room like a peacock. As soon as he spotted me, his grin widened. "Well, look who decided to show up," he said loudly, ensuring the relatives around us could hear. "You ready for the wedding? I made sure you'd have a seat where you feel right at home." A cousin laughed nervously. My stomach twisted, but I refused to let him see me flinch. "Oh, I saw your note," I said calmly, sipping my drink. His eyes gleamed with satisfaction. "Good. I wanted to make sure you didn't miss it. I wouldn't want you wandering into the wrong section. Family up front, losers in the back." The room filled with awkward chuckles. My father cleared his throat, mumbling, "Ethan..." But he didn't follow through. My mother pretended to busy herself in the kitchen. Only Grandpa Walter, sitting quietly in his recliner, caught my eye. His look wasn't pity. It was knowing. He gave me the smallest nod as if to say, "Don't let him win." That night, lying awake, I replayed the moment over and over. Ethan had crossed a line, but what stung more was how comfortable he felt doing it. He had no fear of consequences because he was sure I wouldn't fight back. And in the past, maybe I wouldn't have. I had spent years swallowing my anger, telling myself it wasn't worth the drama. But this time, it was different. The insult was bigger, the audience wider, the humiliation more deliberate. The days leading up to the wedding became a blur of tension. Invitations arrived for other relatives, each one buzzing with excitement about the event. My phone lit up with group messages from cousins planning their outfits and carpooling arrangements. My mother called me twice to remind me not to be late. "This isn't like one of your casual work parties," she scolded. "This is important. Don't embarrass us." Her words hit me harder than she realized. Don't embarrass us. It was always about appearances, always about Ethan's shining reputation. No one ever worried about how he embarrassed me. I began to imagine the scene at the wedding, the glittering decorations, the polished tables, the music swelling as guests took their seats, and then there would be me, escorted past my parents, past my brother, past rows of relatives, to a table labeled, if not literally, then symbolically, the loser's table. I pictured Ethan smirking as he watched me sit down, satisfied that he had reminded everyone of my place. But what he didn't know was that I had been quietly building something of my own. While Ethan bragged about his flashy cars and business deals, I had been making careful investments. My work as a financial analyst gave me insight into markets and opportunities most people ignored. I had saved, researched, and taken risks that paid off. My family didn't know about the properties I had acquired, the slow but steady foundation I had built for my future. And in a twist of fate, one of those properties happened to be the very venue where Ethan's wedding was set to take place. I hadn't told a soul, not my parents, not even Grandpa Walter. To me, it had been just another smart move, another step toward independence. But now, with Ethan's insult still echoing in my head, I realized just how much power that decision gave me. As the wedding day approached, the tension in my chest turned into something else: determination. For years, Ethan had relied on my silence. For years, he had assumed I'd always play the role of the loser he cast me as. But this time, I had a card to play. I would go to the wedding, I would RSVP, yes, I would smile when I walked in. And when the moment came, I would show Ethan and everyone else just how badly they had underestimated me. The stage was set. The conflict wasn't just about a wedding invitation anymore. It was about years of being dismissed, years of being overlooked, years of being told I didn't belong. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to turn that script upside down. The night I dropped my RSVP card into the mailbox, I felt a shift inside me. For years, I had carried the weight of my family's judgment in silence. But this time was different. The wedding invitation, with its cruel little note about a loser's table, wasn't just an insult, it was an opportunity. Ethan had unknowingly handed me the stage for a moment that would change everything. I wasn't going to confront him with angry words or try to plead with my parents for fairness. That never worked. They would either laugh it off or tell me I was being dramatic. This time, my answer wouldn't come in the form of an argument. It would come in the form of an action so undeniable that no one in the family could ever overlook me again. What Ethan didn't know, and what no one in the family had bothered to ask about, was the life I had been quietly building outside their spotlight. While they mocked me for living in a modest apartment and working a boring job, I was investing. I didn't just analyze numbers at my desk each day. I used that knowledge to make choices about my own future. Real estate had been my focus. I started small. A duplex outside the city, then a fixer-upper I renovated and rented out. Each property became a stepping stone, building both my confidence and my financial independence. The biggest move came when an opportunity fell into my lap. The property where Ethan planned to host his lavish wedding had quietly gone up for sale. It was a historic estate, popular for high-end weddings and events. Most buyers overlooked it because of the upkeep costs and complicated ownership structure. But I had done my homework. I saw potential, not problems. I pooled my savings, leveraged my existing assets, and made the purchase. It was the boldest decision of my life, and I signed the papers just weeks before Ethan's wedding date. At the time, I hadn't thought much about the irony. I hadn't bought it to hurt him. I bought it because it was smart. But after receiving his note, the timing felt like fate. The more I thought about it, the clearer my plan became. I would attend the wedding as expected. I would dress with elegance and poise, sit at whatever table he had assigned me, and say nothing. Then, when the time came, I would let the truth reveal itself in a way that Ethan could never spin or laugh off. The venue wasn't his. It wasn't the bride's. It wasn't rented from some faceless company. It was mine. And the moment the announcement was made, his arrogance would collapse under its own weight. Still, I knew that carrying out this plan required more than a sense of triumph. I needed restraint. The temptation to gloat, to shout my victory across the hall, would be strong. But if I gave in to that impulse, I would become exactly what Ethan had always painted me as: emotional, petty, small. My victory had to be quiet, deliberate, undeniable. In the weeks leading up to the wedding, I prepared myself. I met with the venue's management team, reviewed the contracts, and ensured that all official communications went through me. They knew I was the new owner, and they respected my decision to keep that information private until the day of the event. "Are you sure you want to wait until then?" the manager asked. "It could create tension." "I'm sure," I replied. "I want the truth to be clear, not whispered about behind closed doors. It needs to happen in the open." At the same time, I prepared emotionally. I knew walking into that room would be difficult. I would be surrounded by relatives who saw me as less, by my parents who would scold me if I so much as breathed wrong, by Ethan who would undoubtedly try to humiliate me again. But I reminded myself of something Grandpa Walter always said: dignity isn't given to you. You carry it yourself. One evening, I sat with him on his porch, sipping tea as the sun dipped low. I didn't tell him about the venue purchase, but I needed his reassurance. "Grandpa," I asked quietly, Have you ever felt like no matter what you do, it's never enough? He looked at me with kind eyes, his voice steady. Of course. Everyone feels that at some point. But the people who matter will see your worth, Claire. The ones who don't, they'll choke on their pride eventually. I smiled faintly, holding back the secret that was burning in my chest. If only he knew how right he was. The turning point wasn't just about buying the venue. It was about deciding who I wanted to be when the truth came out. I didn't want to be the bitter sister who ruined her brother's wedding out of spite. I wanted to be the woman who had endured years of dismissal, yet still rose with grace. The woman who had built something real and solid while others wasted their energy mocking her. The woman who could finally walk into a room full of doubters and know she didn't need their approval because she had already proved herself. As the wedding day drew closer, I felt an unfamiliar calm settle over me. The fear, the shame, the self-doubt that had haunted me for years began to fade. For once, I wasn't bracing for Ethan's insults or my mother's scolding. I was bracing for my own strength. The day before the wedding, I laid out my dress, a simple but elegant navy gown. Nothing flashy, nothing desperate for attention. Just me, showing up as myself. I slipped my RSVP confirmation into my purse and glanced once more at the invitation on my table. The cruel note was still tucked inside, the ink bold and permanent. I could have thrown it away weeks ago, but I kept it. Not as a reminder of my pain, but as proof of how far I had come. Ethan wanted me at the loser's table. What he didn't know was that the entire house, the tables, the chandeliers, the walls themselves, belonged to me. The decision was made. The plan was in motion. And for the first time in my life, I was looking forward to a family gathering, not because I wanted their approval, but because I no longer needed it. The morning of the wedding arrived crisp and bright, the kind of day brides dream about. I woke before my alarm, my body humming with energy that wasn't nerves, it was anticipation. For years, family gatherings had meant bracing myself for subtle slights and cruel jokes, but this day was different. I wasn't walking into the lion's den defenseless anymore. I was walking in with quiet power. I dressed carefully, choosing a navy gown that was elegant but understated. I curled my hair, applied makeup that enhanced rather than masked, and slipped on the silver necklace Grandpa Walter had given me for my 21st birthday. Before I left, I glanced at the invitation one last time, the note tucked inside like a relic of my past humiliation. Instead of anger, I felt a calm resolve. I tucked it back in its envelope and placed it in my purse. It would serve as a reminder of why I was doing this, not for revenge, but for dignity. The venue was buzzing when I arrived. Luxury cars lined the driveway and guests in tuxedos and glittering dresses strolled toward the grand entrance. I held my head high as I walked past them, smiling politely. Some recognized me and offered hesitant greetings, the kind that carried an undertone of pity. They knew my place in the family hierarchy, or at least they thought they did. Inside, the estate was dazzling. White roses cascaded from tall vases, chandeliers sparkled overhead, and a string quartet played softly in the corner. Every detail screamed Ethan's taste, expensive, showy, designed to impress. He was already at the front of the room, greeting guests with exaggerated warmth, his fiancée Marissa glowing at his side. When his eyes landed on me, his grin widened into a smirk. "Well, well, Claire made it," he called out loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "Don't worry, we've got your seat ready in the back." A few people chuckled uncomfortably, glancing at me to gauge my reaction. I simply smiled, nodded, and made my way to the table marked with numbers rather than names. It was tucked into a corner, far from the family's main seating area. Ethan thought he had humiliated me again, but he had no idea that this arrangement only set the stage for what was about to unfold. As the guests settled in, the air filled with laughter and chatter. Waiters circulated with trays of champagne, and photographers snapped endless pictures of Ethan and Marissa. My parents floated nearby, beaming with pride while avoiding my gaze entirely. Grandpa Walter sat near the front, giving me a subtle nod when our eyes met. That one gesture was enough to steady me. Then, as the ceremony was about to begin, the venue manager stepped up to the microphone. His voice was calm, professional, but his words sliced through the chatter like a blade. "Ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please?" he began. The The room quieted instantly. I regret to inform you that this event cannot proceed as planned. Due to a change in ownership, authorization for this wedding has been revoked. For a moment, no one moved. A ripple of confusion spread across the room. Marissa's face drained of color, and Ethan's smile faltered. Guests whispered to one another, some gasping outright. My mother shot out of her chair, her voice sharp. "What are you talking about? This is my son's wedding." The manager remained composed. The estate was recently purchased. The new owner has not approved the continuation of this event. All eyes turned toward Ethan, who was now red-faced and sputtering. Purchased? That's ridiculous. We booked this place months ago. Who the hell owns it now? The manager turned slightly, his hand gesturing toward the back corner of the room. She does. Dozens of heads swiveled at once, the weight of their gaze landing squarely on me. I stood slowly, every movement deliberate, and smoothed my gown. My heart pounded, but my face remained calm. Ethan's jaw dropped. "You've got to be kidding me." He marched toward me, his voice rising. You bought this place?" I met his glare without flinching. "Yes, I did." Gasps filled the air. Guests whispered in disbelief. My mother clutched my father's arm, her mouth opening and closing without words. Marissa stared at me like I had grown 2 heads. Ethan's voice cracked with anger. "You ruined my wedding. Do you have any idea what you've done?" I tilted my head, my voice steady. "I didn't ruin anything. You booked an event at a property you didn't bother to understand. You mocked me, called me a loser, and all the while you never realized I was building something real. I didn't need to embarrass you, Ethan. You did that to yourself." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the string quartet had stopped mid-song. From the front, Grandpa Walter chuckled, breaking the tension. "Looks like the so-called loser just outsmarted the golden boy." His words sent a ripple of nervous laughter through the crowd, and suddenly the tide shifted. The smirks once directed at me were now turned on Ethan. Marissa's parents looked furious, whispering harshly to one another. My mother sat frozen, her face pale with shock, while my father buried his face in his hands. Ethan stood trembling, his fists clenched, but he had no comeback. For the first time in his life, he was the one on the receiving end of humiliation. I didn't gloat. I didn't raise my voice. I simply lifted my chin and said clearly enough for the room to hear, "Enjoy the rest of your evening. As the owner, I'll make sure you're all taken care of, but this wedding will not continue here today." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit. Each step felt lighter than the last. I could feel the eyes of every guest following me, not with pity, but with stunned respect. The moment I stepped outside into the crisp evening air, I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, I wasn't carrying the weight of my family's ridicule. I wasn't the quiet, overlooked sister anymore. I was the woman who had stood her ground, who had turned years of dismissal into a moment no one would ever forget. Inside, chaos erupted, but I didn't need to see it. The reveal had already happened. The balance had shifted, and I knew that from this day forward, nothing would ever be the same again. The moment I stepped out of the venue, the cold evening air rushed against my skin, sharp and refreshing. Behind me, the once celebratory estate was filled with murmurs, gasps, and raised voices. I could hear Ethan shouting, my mother's frantic tone trying to control the situation, and the faint hum of confused guests wondering how to react. But I didn't turn back. I didn't need to see the fallout. The truth had already landed. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking away in shame. I was walking away with my head high, knowing I had reclaimed something Ethan could never take back, my dignity. That night, I drove home in silence. No music, no distractions, just the hum of the road beneath my tires and the steady realization that I had finally broken free from years of being the family's scapegoat. Ethan's cruel note about the loser's table had been meant to remind me of my place. Instead, it became the moment that proved I had built a place of my own. The days that followed were unlike anything I expected. My phone lit up with texts from relatives, cousins, and even distant family friends who had witnessed the scene. Some messages were filled with shock, others with awkward attempts at apology. A A few admitted they had laughed along with Ethan in the past because it was easier than standing up to him. One cousin wrote, "Claire, I've never seen anyone put him in his place like that. I didn't know you had it in you." I didn't respond to most of them. Their sudden change of tone wasn't what I was after. For years, they had stayed silent while I endured the jokes and the insults. I didn't need their validation now. The only voice that mattered was my own. My parents, however, couldn't stay silent. My mother called 2 days later, her voice trembling with fury. "Claire, how could you humiliate us like that? Do you realize what you did to your brother?" I let her rant, her words pouring out like venom. When she finally paused, I spoke calmly. "No, Mom. Ethan humiliated himself. He tried to make me into the family joke one last time, and he got burned. You've spent years watching him tear me down, and you never once defended me. So don't call me now and ask me to protect his pride." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she whispered, "You've changed." "Yes," I said. "I finally stopped waiting for your approval." My father's call came a day later. His voice was quieter, more measured. "Claire, I don't agree with how you handled things, but I see your point. Maybe we should have done more to stop Ethan." His words weren't an apology, not really, but they were the closest he had ever come to acknowledging my pain. I thanked him for calling, but I didn't let it soften me. I knew better than to expect him to suddenly grow a backbone. The one call that meant everything came from Grandpa Walter. "You did it, kiddo," he said, his voice full of pride. "I always told you they'd choke on their pride someday. You didn't just prove them wrong, you proved yourself right. That's worth more than any applause." Hearing his words brought tears to my eyes. For once, someone I loved wasn't pitying me or lecturing me. He was proud. And that was enough. As for Ethan, he stayed silent. Not a single word from him in the weeks after the canceled wedding. But the gossip traveled quickly. His fiancée's family was furious. Their perfect day ruined, their investment of time and money wasted. The whispers around town painted Ethan not as a successful golden boy, but as a man so arrogant he hadn't even bothered to check who owned the venue. His pride, the very thing he weaponized against me, had destroyed him. And me? I moved forward. I continued working at my job, managing my properties, and living the life I had built brick by brick. But something inside me had shifted. I no longer carried the quiet ache of needing to be accepted by my family. I no longer measured myself against Ethan's shadow. I had faced their scorn head on and walked away stronger. The lesson I took with me was simple but powerful. Silence can be a weapon, but action is the victory. For years, I thought biting my tongue was strength, that enduring their treatment without complaint was the only way to survive. But true strength was making choices that spoke louder than any insult. True strength was refusing to let their definition of me become my reality. I didn't buy the estate to ruin Ethan's wedding. I bought it because I saw value in it, because I trusted myself to take risks they never believed I could handle. The fact that it collided with his big day was fate's way of reminding me that patience pays off, that staying true to myself, even in the face of ridicule, was never wasted. Looking back, I don't regret a single moment, not the years of being mocked, not the nights I cried alone, not even the cruel note that started it all. Because without those experiences, I wouldn't have had the fire to build something of my own. I wouldn't have had the quiet resilience that turned into strength. And now, whenever I think of Ethan's words, "separate table for losers," I smile. Because in the end, the only loser that day was the brother who thought he would always be on top. If there's one thing I want anyone listening to my story to take away, it's this. Your worth isn't defined by your family's approval or anyone else's opinion. It's defined by what you build, what you endure, and the courage you have to stand tall when it matters most. So when life hands you an invitation meant to humiliate you, don't tear it up. Don't walk away in silence. Show up, smile, and let your actions rewrite the ending. And that's how my brother's perfect wedding day turned into the moment he'll never forget. For years, I was the one they laughed at, the one they dismissed as a failure. But in the end, the so-called loser walked away with her head high, while the golden boy lost everything he thought he had. If you connected with this story, if it made you feel something, I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done if you were in my place? Would you have kept quiet? Or would you have let the truth come out the way I did? Share your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one. And if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel so you never miss more stories like this. Your support helps these stories reach more people, and it means the world to me. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.